terrible hack. Why?
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to get kind of closer.
One that was very recent, March 29th, so actually written today, is the repercussions of the CoinCheck hack, which is a Japanese exchange, if I'm not mistaken, that got $500 million worth of this token called NEM stolen from them. And just the repercussions of that, 2 Japanese cryptocurrency exchanges have to shut down once again. So this is a very real problem. And it's not just the fact that they get hacked, it's the fact that users can't trust that they won't get hacked. So now users that want to get into cryptocurrency, a lot of them are kind of prevented from doing that because they feel like putting their money on this exchange is not secure. Can't trust it. Second one, cryptocurrency exchanges are at the mercy of governments. And the problem here is not so much that the regulations suck for them right now. It's the uncertainty of the regulation in the future. So government can at one point for a whim decide to ban certain accounts or ban exchanges altogether, and there's just no way of knowing beforehand. So once again, as an example, written a week ago, Binance, I think this is like their 3rd country that they're headquartered in. Before it was Hong Kong, and before it was somewhere else in China, if I recall. Once again, they have to move to Malta because Hong Kong passed legislation that made it not favorable for them to be there. And so now they're in Malta, and supposedly this is great because as you see in the article here, Malta has crypto-friendly legislation, but who knows? They might change. They might get sanctioned by Europe for these cryptocurrency things. Nobody knows beforehand.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You said that before that putting money on the exchange, it's risky.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, it's just while you're doing the transaction, because otherwise you keep it on your wallet, yeah?
Yes, but unfortunately a lot of users are lazy, so they do keep money on exchanges where they shouldn't, right?
Okay.
So another one, and this is also maybe pretty well known, but South Korea has interesting regulation when it comes to cryptocurrency exchanges. In particular, if you're not a Korean, you're not allowed to have an account. And in times of a bull rally or a high rise in the price of Bitcoin, for example, you get huge discrepancies between the price on these Korean exchanges and the price on other exchanges. And this leads to great arbitrage opportunities. And if you have a Korean friend, make them sign up on one of these exchanges. You can probably make a lot of money. Third of all, closed networks. Now this one is a bit more subtle to describe, but it's best done with the example, if you guys know, of BitGrail. Now, BitGrail, a couple months ago, a new cryptocurrency came out, or I don't know if it was new, but it came on the scene called Ryblox. Now, some of you probably have heard of that. Ryblox had all these interesting properties, like it wasn't one blockchain, it was a bunch of blockchains communicating together, everyone was running their own. The details don't matter. The point is that there's new cryptocurrency, people are excited about it, people want to buy or sell it. The problem was that nobody had any support for this cryptocurrency so far. It was a new one and they didn't support it, they didn't care about it. Binance didn't list it until like a month or something ago. And so one cryptocurrency exchange, a new one, saw an opportunity to capitalize on this named BitGrail. So BitGrail used to be the only place that you could really trade Ryblox back and forth with Ether and stuff. Now, the problem here, I'll explain later. So what happened is that BitGrail, through a bunch of scandals, made sure that 150 million of Nano, which is now called Nano, used to be called Ryblox, like I said, went up in smoke. And they're, of course, pointing the finger at each other. The more important thing here to realize is the fact that one centralized exchange decided not to add this new currency to their portfolio made this kind of thing possible. Whereas if it was an open network, if it wasn't closed like that, it was an open network and someone wanted to start trading a new token or create liquidity in a different way, serve a new market, they would just be able to join and add that liquidity in. So, in summary, 3 problems: vulnerable to hacks, at the mercy of governments, and closed networks. Now, you might think that you've seen this before, and if you think so, you have. Namely, I think that you see a lot of the same problems with centralized money or traditional finance. If you think about fiat currencies, vulnerable to hacks. Companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year trying to counteract fraud, credit card fraud, and all these things. They're real honeypots for hackers. Maybe it's harder to get these credit cards to liquidate these credit cards into money, but it's in general pretty easy. And so these are once again honeypots for hackers. At the mercy of governments, very obviously so, because the government regulates the money and what you can do with it and what financial institutions can do with it. And maybe most importantly, closed networks, the gatekeepers of this traditional finance system, have it in their incentive to make sure they're the only ones that you can go through. For example, banks or funds of any kind. Basically, the whole system is a closed network. Now, of course, everyone here knows that this was solved, quote unquote, in 2009 with the advent of Bitcoin. More on that later. So, if you look at these, if you look at these problems, I think they actually all stem from one kind of root issue that's shared between all of these, namely counterparty risk. Now, for those that don't know what counterparty risk is, basically if you start an exchange or a contract with someone else, call them the counterparty. Counterparty risk comes into play when they can go back on their contractual obligations with regards to this exchange. Let's say I wanted to exchange 1 Ether for 0.5 Bitcoin, and I found a counterparty to do that with. The risk is that I would send the Ether, and this keeps cutting out. I don't know why. I would send the Ether, and they would not send my Bitcoin back, right? And if you think about it, this kind of risk is very important for transactions that have very high value, such as exchange of currency. Like you don't want this risk in the case of exchanging currency. You don't want this risk in the case of sending money. Like you can't afford that, right? And so this problem of counterparty risk is what fuels these 3 subproblems I set up here. Now, the way we've solved this in the past, both with traditional finance and cryptocurrency exchanges, is by putting trust in people. Namely, the people that run the cryptocurrency exchanges, in the case of exchanges, the company, the shareholders of that company, the government, but basically a group of people that decides what goes and what doesn't, with any number of incentives that is aligned in a certain way. But to be able to transact high-value things, you have to trust people. If the point is that you can put 1 Ether on an exchange and trust that it's in their incentive to make sure you get that back in one way or shape or form. What I often think is like one of the biggest innovations, if not the biggest innovation, of 2009, of Bitcoin, is the ability to, instead of putting trust in people, putting your trust in algorithms. In this case, the blockchain, proof of work, concepts like that. And this allows you to have drastically different security properties in these exchanges, as you guys are all aware with Bitcoin. With that said, sorry, I don't see ahead of my slides here. Wish I did. So with that said, let's talk about decentralized exchanges. Decentralized exchanges, to be very short, is exchanges that operate on a decentralized basis akin to how cryptocurrency is. Now, I've identified 2 main constituent parts to decentralized exchanges. First off, decentralized settlements, which means once you've decided with one person or another to exchange, you can do so, you can settle that in a decentralized manner and not through a central authority or a group of people. Second of all, decentralized order book of how do you find that person in the first place, right? You don't want, this could once again also be manipulated pretty easily if you had centralized control of the order book. So with that, I took these ideas and I kind of explored a bunch of the decentralized exchanges. In particular, I'm right now going to focus on ERC20 token exchanges on Ethereum because we're at Ethereum meetup. It's also the decentralized exchange field that seems to be getting the most attention right now. So I'll break it down from there. First off, arguably the first real decentralized exchange that worked in production, which a lot of you probably know, is called EtherDelta. Now, what EtherDelta does to solve these 2 parts is, as you see there, off-chain order book, on-chain settlement. What that means is that when you want to exchange with someone else, you take a package that describes your order, your currency order. For example, I want to trade my 1 Ether for 0.05 Bitcoin. you take that, you sign it with your private key, you publish it to a centralized server, namely Ethereum-Delta, and they will then put that somewhere so that other people can match with it. However, once it's matched, once you find someone else to transact with, to exchange with, the settlement is done on-chain through a smart contract. So you'd be able to start, and I'm not actually sure of the specific, but you'd be able to start a settlement and then end it, and it would be swapped atomically. This, of course, piggybacks on the fact that the Ethereum blockchain allows for these trustless atomic interactions in this form of smart contracts. Ethereum-Delta actually is not that great to use apparently because it doesn't actually do order matching. It just allows you to kind of pick one order. You can either make an order and then you have to click on it to fulfill it. It's apparently not a great user experience, but granted, it is the first. Kind of in line with that idea, similar, is MirrorX protocol, which they call an open permissionless protocol, allowing for ERC20 tokens to be traded on the Ethereum blockchain. And the way that it's similar is they do the same thing with off-chain order book, on-chain settlement. But they kind of, instead of putting it all on one off-chain order book, they basically allow a protocol for different order books to exchange orders with each other. So the nomenclature they have for these order books that are off-chain is called relayers, because they relay the orders, they relay the liquidity, kind of. And so the idea is that you have one common protocol, like an open network, which is one of the problems I was talking about, an open network to join in, that is open and permissionless, as you see, but order books themselves can be closed for all means, but as long as they can share liquidity among each other. And so this is an image I stole from the Hoeff protocol website. I don't know if this describes it that well, but basically you can see at the top there is the relayer that will then match, like accept orders from people, same thing, signing the package, sending it, accept orders, match them together, and when the settlement happens, it'll happen on-chain through a smart contract. Now, the layer on top of that, the reason that OX is different from Ethereum-Delta is that they have a token with which you can buy and sell liquidity from one another. So relayers, or you can see them as exchange front ends, can capture a market niche, for example, for like golem tokens or whatever they might do. Maybe they have a really nice UI, maybe they're in a different language, but they can somehow grab liquidity and then, if need be, sell that to other relayers with this token. And so basically there would be an incentive for you to join this network and share that liquidity with people, which is one of the big problems that I mentioned. So that's OX protocol. I think it has a lot of promise. And it's been doing very well, making a lot of waves, so hope it works out.
Are the relayers on their own blockchain at all? Like, are they sidechain, or what are the relayers?
Neither of those. They are basically just another SQL database that matches orders. So, this is not perfectly decentralized. It doesn't itself run on a blockchain like Binance's maybe new exchange might do.
Are you aware of any trust issues while you are on the relay? You can contest some.
A relayer could cancel your order and tell you that it's not canceled, for example. But since you are still the one in control of your keys and you are still the one saying okay to the settlement on chain, in general you're protected from it. Plus, it's in their incentive to create liquidity, so it's not in their incentive to hide that from you.
I mean, but you could have a situation that you get an attack on a relay, some mean guy, so then it's not consistent, I mean...
It would suck, but there's nothing really for hackers to gain there. Because the packages have to be signed by the users themselves, right? So if they can't mess with the package and then send it to the smart contract to do the settlement.
So the settlement doesn't happen until both parties come later and then both have signed their keys and then it matches after that. So it's you have to set the order and then come back later and sign it.
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I didn't get into it that far, but I imagine it would happen something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
So these are both ideas. So Ethereum-Delta and Hoeff protocol are kind of ideas that draw a lot from how we see exchanges nowadays, which are kind of spot exchanges, which there's a buy order, you can put a sell order, they are for a certain price, and the exchange matches it at the most advantageous price, right? There are other ideas too that you can use to build a decentralized exchange, such as Kyber network, which you can see is a decentralized shapeshift. The reason for this is that they don't have an order book with buyers and sellers that are all users. What they in fact have is big users or reserves with big amounts of tokens that come to the network. They have to go through a KYC process and sign up with Kyber network. It's not something that anyone can do. Basically, they come there with a big reserve of tokens. For example, let's say 10,000 Golem tokens. And so they put that on the Kyber network as sellers for them to be used by users that want to transfer one token into another. And they determine the price that that's at. And the logic here for Kyber network is that because of competition between these reserves, you get a fair price. But from a user's perspective, there will be a number of reserves of tokens with huge amounts of tokens. You would say, I want to swap 20 Golem for one Augur rep, for example, and then the token reserve with the lowest price for Augur rep would then be matched with you, and you basically shapeshift through them. Now, whether this is going to work out, of course, we don't know either, because there could be great arbitrage opportunities once again, because the liquidity could be kind of low for this, or the price could not update as fast, or it could be lagging behind the market, things like that. So we don't know yet. Some other dexes that I didn't really go over, maybe because they are not on Ethereum, but they are interesting. BitShares, which I think does a whole, that actually is, like you were saying, a decentralized order book, I believe. And they claim to do 10,000 of transactions per second. I doubt when people say that, because there's always a trade-off. They probably trade off security for that. There's Waves platform.
They use DPoS. It's a delegated proof of stake to make the transactions faster. That's how they get
Cool.
speed.
How secure is that?
Well, it's a blockchain. It's a blockchain.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they trade off speed for security, or you trade off security for speed. What's your impact? Does it mean that hackers easier to hack the blockchain or something?
You can look at it like that. It means that it's easier to attack the network with a 51% attack or whatever. There's more trust involved. Like anytime you move the lever for security in one direction, you move speed the other way. That's why we started with a very secure network in the form of Bitcoin with the proof of work. I mean, very secure is debatable, but they sure put their effort in. Ethereum still proof of work. The reason that they are so slow is because every computer on the network, every miner has to execute every transaction, which makes it very secure, but unfortunately right now very slow. There's also Waves platform, which is a decentralized exchange that seems to be running well. They have web client and a desktop client and all that. They actually are also doing crypto to fiat, which is a very important thing to do. I tried signing up and getting some crypto or fiat just because I was curious. It's a very hard process. You have to go through some third-party identity verification thing. It's still, and I think it was in German or something, is still quite hard to do, which is obviously a great pain point in crypto in general. There's also Stellar, which
Hold on, sorry. For Waves, do you know where the fiat is stored? Is it in a bank account controlled by?
I think it's credit on the network.
It's online.
So yeah, I mean, yes, it's stored on a bank account, like it has to be stored on a bank account somewhere, but you get the credit on the network. Like with Stellar and the next one also.
So it's Waves is has a centralized intermediary?
Yeah. Yeah. So they are a gateway for decentralized currencies.
And they just built that into their infrastructure that they're hosting, basically?
Yeah. It's definitely a bit on the centralized side like that. Which, what are you gonna do, right? It's the traditional finance is centralized. You have to go through a bank. There's not much you can do. So, but still, and Stellar, which has a decentralized order book, like I was talking before, decentralized settlement arguably too, but it's not as much a cryptocurrency as it is a credit network. It's a network of nodes that kind of issue credit on behalf of users, so you can come there, for example, with your Canadian dollars, and they would issue you credit on this network that you then be able to exchange for any number of tokens as long as there's anchors, which are anchored assets from the real world into this network. Oh, right. So this is all the decentralized exchange business, particularly with ERC20 tokens. No longer, not going to update. ERC20 tokens, which of course is a bit cheating because you're using the Ethereum's transactional atomicity, if that's a word, to be able to settle these transactions on chain. You don't have to worry about any decentralized settlement problems. However, what if I actually did want to swap one Ethereum for 0.05 Bitcoin? And I think the title of this presentation is actually Atomic Swap, so trust me, I'm getting to it. But to solve this problem of mitigating the risk of mitigating counterparty risk while swapping between two blockchains, people have thought of a method to do this called cross-chain atomic swaps, which, as the name suggests, are cross-chains, so between two cryptocurrency changes, and atomic, meaning that both sides of the swap in and swap out, either both happen or neither of them happen. And I'm going to explain how this works because I think this is actually really cool, and it's really neat how this works. Important to understand too. So here's a scenario. Alice and Bob want to exchange Ether and Bitcoin. In particular, Alice wants to exchange one Bitcoin for 0.05, one Ether for 0.05 Bitcoin, and conversion. So what do? If you want to initiate a cross-chain atomic swap, you first generate a random secret called P, or the pre-image. And this random secret is just a sequence of 32 bytes at random. What you then do is calculate the hash H, which is just the SHA-256 of P. So you have the secret pre-image and the hash. And what you do, if we paint here the two networks with 4 accounts, 2 accounts for each person, what Alice does is she makes one transaction of one Ether locked with H. Now what this means is that Alice has officially given away the money. The money is no longer hers. However, it is not Bob's yet. Bob can only claim it if he has some number, some sequence of bytes that hashes to H. So basically, Bob has to have P to be able to claim this. So the transaction is kind of in limbo. You can see it as it is in cryptographic escrow. Now, what Bob does is he can, of course, look at the Ethereum blockchain and see that H and copy it. And so he does that and makes out a transaction the other way on the Bitcoin network, the other network, also locked on H. So Alice will send this transaction initially, wait for the transaction the other way to come back on the Bitcoin network, locked with the same hash. This is really important. Now, what Alice does to claim this Bitcoin over here, this 0.05 Bitcoin, you'll see. She claims the Bitcoin using this secret P. So she generated a secret, but now it's of course no longer a secret. But at least she has the Bitcoin now. So the Bitcoin network verifies that this P, if applied a SHA-256 hash function to it, hashes to H and then officially gives Alice her money. Of course, since these are both all blockchains, this is all an immutable record that can't be tampered with unless you have a lot of hardware. Now, what Bob, of course, can do is grab this not-so-secret P anymore and claim the Ether on Ethereum. The end result is that this swap has now occurred without counterparty risk. This is, in my opinion, very wide implications.
So hold on, do they need to speak to each other off-chain? Like, do they need to know each other? Can this happen?
That's a good question. So they have to meet up, they have to agree somehow to transactions, but once they do, you actually can just look at the respective blockchains for this information. You don't have to have a communication channel open.
So Alice knows Bob, usually.
Well, or they're matched through some service, some other decentralized service.
Okay.
Yes?
If you go back to slide, I'm just wondering, how does Bob lock with H without using secret P to generate H?
Because he can look at the Ethereum blockchain and find the hash that is grabbed from the pre-image, but of course since hash send functions are secure in one way, you cannot grab the pre-image from it. So basically he just copies the hash from the Ethereum blockchain over to the Bitcoin blockchain.
The Bitcoin script environment.
No, that's the problem, of course. Yeah.
So Bob gets H and uses it to send his Bitcoin over. How does he calculate P from that?
Not yet. There's no such thing as calculating P from H. If there was, then Bitcoin wouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah, if Alice uses P to open it, then Bob will open it, right? So you open it, and like other stuff will also be open.
Yes.
How is P like randomly calculated? Is it randomly calculated off-chain or on-chain?
Well, if you calculate it on-chain, it wouldn't be very secret.
Yeah.
So it's off-chain. Whichever method you want. If you want to use a Geiger counter.
So how Bob claims ETH in the final step? He said no so secret P. How he knows that?
Oh, because once P is committed to the Bitcoin blockchain, it is a public immutable record. And so Alice can just inspect the Bitcoin blockchain, and Bob can inspect the Bitcoin blockchain and grab that secret P because it's now public. Maybe should have made that more clear. But yeah, once Alice publicizes the secret P, the transaction has effectively already happened, and that's where the atomicity comes from. Like you either have both of them or none of them. Any more questions? Yeah.
So when Alice announced what the P is, it stops more than one person having H.
Nothing. Well, I mean, there's no. You could have any number of participants make transactions with H, and as soon as P is public, all those transactions will go through. It's also actually another magic thing. You could have like a many participant swap going on that just hinges on one secret number. All right. So the end result: Alice now has 0.05 Bitcoin. Bob has 1 Ethereum. Pretty great. There is, however, in this version of the story, still a security flaw. It's quite a big one, actually. Namely, what happens if Alice commits her 1 ETH, Bob commits his 0.05 Bitcoin, and then Alice doesn't do anything? The money is lost forever. Neither blockchain will allow this money to ever be withdrawn again, unless Alice has P. But if, for example, her computer crashes or she unfortunately passed away, this money can never be found back again. And this is, of course, a significant risk. This is maybe not the incentive of Bob to do this, but it is deleterious. So to mitigate this, these transactions have to have a refund mechanic. They have to be able to be refunded after a certain amount of time. In most cases, kind of 24 hours. Which means that if after 24 hours Alice still hasn't publicized her pre-image, Bob will be able to retract his transaction, get the money back, and so will Alice. Everything is good. However, there is still a security flaw here. Does anybody know what?
The same amount of time. Maybe one person had a little bit longer.
And why is that?
Alice isn't sending the money to Bob anymore. That expires first. Alice can just take the money from Bob.
I think you're right. Yeah. So yeah, in essence, what happens if Alice waits 23 and a half hours to publicize P? 23 and a half hours later. So, as you can see here, the refund only has 30 minutes left, and at this time, Alice publicizes P to claim this 0.05 Bitcoin, which of course makes her in the possession of this Bitcoin, but Bob has gone and taken a hike in the forest because that's what he does on Sundays. Or his laptop crashed, or he can't get good connection. Basically, he has 30 minutes to claim this 1 Ether, or Alice can refund it, which would end up with Alice getting both the Bitcoin and the Ethereum. And so what my friends have so eloquently described, the solution for this is to make the person that generates the secret have to wait twice as long or quite a bit longer than the person that doesn't have the secret. That way, if Alice publicizes P after 23 and a half hours, Bob will still have 24 and a half hours to claim it, so it won't be that time constraint. And at one point, you do have to require Bob to claim it because you got to do something. So actually, I built this. I built, not particular between Bitcoin and Ethereum, but Ethereum and Stellar. because I kind of wanted to see if I could understand it, see if I could build it, and not just build it because it's been done before with scripts and stuff, but build it actually in a browser able to use. And it actually is up at mirror.exchange. Now, it is still quite a rough user experience because you have to enter so many keys, and there's no support for this on many of the wallets yet. But it actually does work. And the plan is maybe to add more coins in the future that can then all be swapped with each other, because Stellar is itself a decentralized exchange. So that's pretty cool. All this great stuff about decentralized exchanges and atomic swaps, of course, comes with a couple of caveats. There are still many things, many problems to be solved before decentralized exchanges become production ready. First of all, probably the biggest problem in all of cryptocurrency right now is the fiat to crypto bridge. It's how do you get your money into and out of cryptocurrency from fiat? And companies like Coinbase have worked very hard to craft relationships with banks to be able to do this for a wide variety of customers. But it's still really hard, really limiting. You have to go through a lot of identity verification. Probably a lot of you have signed up for things like Quadriga, where you have to wait 2 weeks and give your identity, write things down on a piece of paper. It's a pretty terrible process, and it prevents a lot of people from actually signing up. This, of course, is arguably even a bigger problem for decentralized exchanges, because then there's much less of a one company to have a relationship with as a bank or a government. Maybe even more importantly, a lot of these decentralized exchanges, since they're such new technology, are very hard to use still. Like the app that I built, it's still very difficult to get it done. Akin to cryptocurrency. When it came out, a lot of people were rightfully saying that it's still really hard to use and keep your private keys secure while still being able to sign things. And only with the advent of things like the Ledger wallet or Trezor has it kind of gotten to that point of like usable versus secure. It's still really difficult to do. And a lot of people kind of give this argument for a reason why cryptocurrency won't succeed, and they have solid points, to be honest. So usability is still a really important thing that decentralized exchanges need to figure out because it's such a new technology. Third of all, of course, with any new software, stability. We don't know how all these exchanges work yet. They could be hacked or manipulated, or there could be a DDoS attack vector, things like that. There's all kinds of concerns you could have around new decentralized exchanges that hasn't been tested yet. For reference, this is the roadmap for Kyber Network. As you can see, they're still very far out from actually launching. They have just launched on mainnet, and it's going to be early 2019 before they have cross-chain trading. So it's still very much in the works. Now, I did start this presentation out with the title, The Future of Exchanges, and I've only been talking about the technology. So, sorry. Even with these roadblocks, even with these tough things we have to go through, and how a lot of times it seems way less convenient to go through a decentralized exchange as opposed to a centralized one, I do think it is going to be the future of how we exchange currencies with each other. And I think it's going to be a very important thing to nail, right? Because these three problems of centralized exchange that I've described, I believe are really barriers to entry for a lot of cryptocurrency activity. A lot of people are having trouble with exchanges, or they have to keep switching, or they have to have accounts in many different exchanges. It's all a pretty terrible experience so far, and we need to iron this out before we can really see the cryptocurrency revolution take over the world. But I do think it will happen. And it's probably going to happen in the next couple of years. It's going to go really fast. Thank you. Yes.
So what do you think about the positioning of something like a centralized exchange such as Binance? So those centralized exchanges, do they be often decentralized exchanges such as atomic swap is so popular?
Well, in the case of Binance, they actually pretty recently announced that they're going to themselves work on a decentralized exchange solution. So maybe in the case of Binance, it is they are ahead of the curve. But in general, you are probably going to see a tapering off of centralized exchanges once decentralized exchanges get to a point of usability that it doesn't make sense to use centralized exchanges anymore. Probably won't be overnight. Again. thinking?
Yeah, maybe that.
All right, I'll speak very loud. Yeah, sure. Anyone else?
Any comments on the fiat to crypto bridge? I mean, that one's not going to be solved by decentralized exchange.
No, it is not. The best you can hope for right now is that the people that are solving this problem right now will continue working on it, continue working with regulation. Hopefully some countries are more open to cryptocurrencies in general, and it'll be easier to transfer fiat into cryptocurrency. Of course, once it is in crypto, it becomes a lot easier to move around, but I don't really know, to be honest. It's a good question.
Which file should I look in for the Stellar transactions?
Sorry?
On your GitHub, where are the Stellar transactions?
It's in the source. No, wait, lib.
Okay, yeah.
Lib swaps the. Good question.
Yeah.
Oh, so for the refunds, when you send, like when Alice sends the money to Bob, doesn't actually send it to their account with the pass of law? Like, are you locked from money?
That's actually a really good question. You use a smart contract, which is something I should elaborate on. But yeah, Ethereum allows for smart contracts. Now, like even Bitcoin, which is not a very advanced scripting language, still actually narrowly allows this kind of contract or script to be executed. So, you know, if it can do on Bitcoin, it can be done in Ethereum, but you have to use a smart contract.
Is there no way for when Alice, for example, announces that he is for it to automatically for it to automatically be?
I mean, that's a very good question. That is, like, if we could solve that, if that could be done a lot easier, that would actually make it a lot easier to do atomic swaps. Right now, it doesn't seem like at least there's any services that do that.
Is there any way for Alice to just cancel it before the time expires, or does she have to wait for 48 hours?
Cryptographically verified to have to wait for 48 hours. Encoded in the smart contract.
So she knows she's not going to give the password, deletes it, but then everyone needs to wait 48 hours.
Yep. So she could be a jerk, right? If she wants to.
Well, she might change her mind. I mean, so,
Hopefully.
yeah.
There are other approaches than yours to
Yep.
solve this problem.
So that's actually a really good question. Something I didn't put in the presentation because it was getting a bit long, but there is the Doge Ethereum bridge, which kind of does things in a different way.
Can you repeat that because it was a noise in the background?
The Doge Ethereum bridge does it in a different way than the one I've described. The way they do it is actually you don't even have to have two users that swap with each other. You can actually move coins from one into the other without a second party, so to speak. The way this is done is by putting all the block headers for Dogecoin on the Ethereum network and then verifying that a transaction fits in a block off-chain using TrueBit, which is the one that the company that won the prize for doing this bridge. And so, therefore, being able to verify that a transaction was officially locked in the Dogecoin network on the Ethereum network and then issuing coins on the Ethereum network. It's actually quite ingenious, though it does still require you to trust that these block headers are being fed in faithfully, which I don't think they have a solution for that yet.
So is that to say that Ethereum actually implements a Doge-like client
Yeah.
on the blockchain?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty advanced now.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. Thank you, guys.
So yeah, thanks again for a great talk. So update on the pizza, that's I think 10, 15 minutes away. And then just what we have you all here. So we're thinking about doing another meetup in 2 weeks, but we know that's in the middle of finals. So how many of you would show up if we had it going? Just raising your hand. Okay, good enough. So yeah, I think we will run a meetup then. Yeah, thanks again.